Alright, so let's see if we can replicate the functionality or the logic that's shown in this diagram into our Treasure Island game. So the first thing it has to do is we have to ask the user whether if they want to turn left or right. And after we ask the user this question, we're going to want to capture their input, right? So let's go ahead and create an input function and ask our question. Now, notice how when I use my double quotes around my string, the double quotes that are inside the double quotes are interpreted as code because it actually thinks that this is the end of the first string, this is the second string, and this is the final string. This is how the computer is going to see it. Now, there's a cool thing that we can do in Python when we have a string like this. We can enclose a string inside a set of double quotes, and let's say we have a string in here. Say the words, she said hello. Now, if we want these double quotes to occur and to be viewed as a part of the text, one trick that we can do is instead of using double quotes to enclose our string, we can actually use single quotes around it instead. And because now we have double quotes inside the single quotes, it will be interpreted as text. And you can see everything inside here is all green. Now, if we try to apply this trick to our input on this line here, there's one slight problem. So let me show you. I'm going to get rid of the final double quote of our string and the first double quote of our string. I'm going to highlight the entire string that I would like to be a part of the input prompt text, and I'm going to type the single quote button to wrap everything inside. Now, we've solved the problem with the double quotes, but we also have a single quote in our sentence. So now what the computer thinks you're trying to do is, here's a string, starting single quote, ending single quote. I've written a bunch of other code, and then I've got some other strings left and right. And at the end, I've somehow forgotten to close that quote. So how can we fix this? Well, a really simple thing is to simply use the backslash button, which is used as an escape symbol in programming. So what this says is, yes, this is a backslash, but if the backslash occurs in front of any other useful symbol, then it will mean that we're trying to escape this symbol. So don't interpret it as code. And instead, if we run our code, you'll see the input print out in its entirety. You're at a crossroad with the apostrophe. Where do you want to go? Type left or right. And it's exactly what we wanted to happen. Now, of course, there's other ways that you could have gone around this. You could have just simply said you are at a crossroad rather than using the apostrophe. But more often than not, you'll need to use a symbol that you'll need to escape, and you can do that with the backslash. So that's just a quick tip. Now, at this point, the user is going to type a message left or right. So let's go ahead and save that to a variable. Let's call it choice1 equals their input. Now, remember how I said they could be typing the answer as right or as right. So how can we make sure that when we're doing our checks using the if statement, we ignore the casing? Well, one way of doing this is we can simply use the lower function to change their input. No matter how they wrote it, right, or right, it should all be converted into lowercase to this version. That way, we have one thing that we can consistently check for in our if statement, which is coming up next. So we can say if choice1 is equal to, remember the double equals is checking whether if left-hand side and right-hand side is equal, and the single equal sign is assigning the right-hand side to this particular variable name. Now, if choice1 equals the string right, then it's pretty much game over for our player. So let's go ahead and add our colon and print something like game over. Of course, we can elaborate this a little bit more as to why was it game over. Well, because you fell into a hole. This is like the E.T. game from the 80s. Lots of holes. So you fell into a hole, game over. But what if they had chosen left instead? Well, that takes them on to the next question. So that's the option that will allow them to continue along the game. Now, in this case, we could use an else statement and say, well, if they didn't choose right, then they probably chose left, right? But they could have also chosen like a option that was completely not listed. They could have just written something like this, and it would still trigger the else statement. So what we should actually do is to switch it around. So namely, we should say if choice 1 is equal to left, well, in that case, then they continue in the game. But otherwise, namely, if they chose right or anything else for that matter, then it's pretty much game over. So this format makes a lot more sense if you want to continue along the left side of the branch this way. Now, another thing that you might have realized because we learnt about combining different conditions is instead of using the dot lower to change the input to lowercase, you could have also said if choice is equal to left or if choice 1 is equal to left, spelled like this. That will both work. But I think in terms of succinctness and less code writing, I think this makes a lot more sense to me. So I'm going to continue with this version, but if you did it the other way, that's perfectly valid as well. Now, if their choice 1 was left, then they get taken to the next question. Do you want to swim or do you want to wait? So let's go ahead and continue the game and create another input. In this input, we're going to ask them a question and say, you've come to a lake. There is an island in the middle of the lake. Type wait to wait for a boat. Type swim to swim across. Cool. So we've actually got the same problem as we had before, namely that this is being interpreted as code rather than as a continuous single string. So do you remember how we fixed this previously? And if you got stuck on this, I recommend having a go at this yourself before I show you the answer. Alright, so previously we said we were going to switch it to single quotes instead, so that these double quotes become interpreted as just normal strings. But of course we've got this you've. We could of course change it to you have instead of you've, but if we want to escape this string, we just add a backslash, which is exactly what we did previously. Now, one thing you might notice here is I'm getting a warning here saying PEP 8, so this is the style guidance, this line is too long. And you might have also felt a little bit annoyed having to scroll left and right constantly to be able to see the end of the line. So what can we do in this case? Well, we can actually very easily pick any point in our entirely long string and just hit enter, and it will automatically do the right thing and make it go on to the next line. Now, this doesn't actually change how it gets printed out, because if I go ahead and stop this and run this code again, you can see it's still typing everything on the same line. You're at a crossroad. Where do you want to go? Type left or right. It doesn't actually affect it at all. The only thing it does is it helps our code to be more readable. So we can go ahead and fix this one as well. So wherever you choose, just hit enter. I did it at the end of a sentence because that makes more sense, but you don't have to. You can actually even put it in the middle of a character if you really wanted to. Now here we're going to see a new warning, and it's basically unhappy with how our indentation looks for this separated second part of this string. So when you hover over some of these PEP 8 warnings, you can actually just click on this button for them to do whatever they think is best. You know, it's like, all right, you do it, you know, leave me alone and just fix it for me. So they fixed it for us, and as usual with AI and machines, it now looks like I have to scroll horizontally again. So let me just fix this so that I put each sentence on a new line so I can see everything in one go without having to scroll around. It's quite good for my sanity. Now, one thing you have to be really careful about is this indentation. Now, this indentation here doesn't really matter at all. It's just all for styling, and the computer was unhappy with having it unaligned with the start of the string, so that's why they asked us to fix it. But the thing that really matters is your code's indentation, because this choice 2, getting the input from the user for the second question, must be indented inside this if statement, because otherwise it's going to give you a indentation error. And this means that only when the choice for the first question was left do we actually prompt them for an input and let them continue the story. And then we get to check our choice 2. So if choice 2 is equal to wait, then it means that the game will continue. But else, so if they typed swim or anything else for that matter, then the game is going to end. So we're going to print and tell them that something terrible happened. You got attacked by an angry trout. Game over. Now we can continue along this path, so we're down to here now, and the final question we're going to ask the user is which door do they want to choose. So here I'm going to use an input to send them the message that you arrive at the island unharmed. There is a house with 3 doors, 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 blue. Which color do you choose? Now I'm going to save their choice inside a variable called choice3, lowercase the answer that they provided, and finally I'm going to use if, elif, and else to check which one they chose. So if choice 3 is equal to red, elif, choice 3 is equal to yellow, elif, choice 3 is equal to blue. And then I've got a else. So here are 4 possible things that could happen. If they chose red, then I'm going to tell them that it's game over, but it's going to be some sort of creative version of game over. So maybe something like it's a room full of fire, game over. If they chose yellow, on the other hand, well, that's going to be the room where the treasure exists. So I'm going to print you found the treasure, you win. If they chose blue, they also end up with game over, and I have to give them a different reason. Now, if you had decided that if they chose anything but yellow, the way that they're going to game over is the same. Say if you chose red, it's a room full of fire, game over. If you chose blue, it's a room full of fire, game over. Anything else, it's also going to be fire, game over. Well, then you could just use if and else. But if you wanted each choice or each door to have a different outcome for the user, say the red door has fire, the blue door has beasts, and if they chose the wrong door, then they're going to get something like, you chose a door that doesn't exist, game over. So can you see that depending on whether if you want to give the user a different print statement based on their choice, then you would use if, elif, else. But if you actually just wanted to give them the same feedback, which is game over, then you could just use if and else. Now let's run our game and just make sure that it works. So I'm going to go left because I know it continues, and then I'm going to wait for the boat, and that allows me to get to the final condition, and if I choose yellow, I know that I'll win. Now, if you want to change the formatting, because having the input at the end of the sentence doesn't look as good as letting the user type it on a new line, then you can simply, if you remember, just add the new line, which is \n, at the end of your inputs. Like so. So how did you get on with this challenge? And if you didn't manage to do it right, or if you've done it right, go back and try and modify it. See if you can add some more conditions, or see if you can make the game over messages a little bit more interesting than what I've written. See if you can modify it and make it really your own. Have fun with that, and in the next lesson, I've got more exciting things coming up for you.